Hey guys, this is Aaron with Goodness Chick for Live at 5 this week. Thank you for joining me. This topic that we're going to be hitting on this week is on racism. And particularly, it's on how to talk with our young people, our kids, our nephews, the kids in our classrooms about the recent events that have been happening, particularly in the United States, when it comes to racism, white supremacy, groups that are unfortunately have been in the news. And I will say this, when it comes to anti-Semitic actions, it is something that has been going on for the past 5 or so years, both throughout Europe and North America. Groups that they can kind of say, well, that it's freedom of speech, which they do have, but is all really kind of absolutely founded on hatred against pretty much anyone that is not like them, whether that be somebody who is a different skin color, whether that be black, different religion, Judaism in particular. And it's hurtful, and it's evil, and it's angry. And I think, there was a time where you could say, well, people are entitled to what they view when it comes to this stuff. You do have a right to voice your opinion, but when it comes to something that is absolutely angry and evil, I personally have an issue with that. Somebody who is of Jewish descent, and I think about how sometimes we have so many people in this country that have been subjected to some form of racism, bias, just evilness, that I do believe it can be really uncomfortable to talk about when it comes to with our kids. But I believe as a parent, as an educator, we can hold our breath when it comes to this kind of stuff and say, you know what, maybe my young person, whether they're in elementary school or in high school, hasn't really picked up on what's been going on. I think that's a really naive mentality to have. And for us as parents to kind of, or educators, take the ball and it is talking about it when it's initiated, what's been going on. And it's going on their level, because there's different approaches when you're dealing with a 16-year-old to a 6-year-old. But when we decide to not talk about it, if somebody comes to you, a young person, and they're asking questions, not talking about it, then sends them a message it's not okay to talk about. And they're either not going to talk about it to anybody, and so what they're going to do is internalize, and with that kind of make different speculations about different things going on. That's going to initiate angst and stress, maybe even hatred and anger, totally unnecessary, or it's going to have them seeking out their peer group or looking on social media. So it's dialoguing with our young people about what's going on. And so if that's what we're doing as an adult, we need to be aware of what's going on, reading the news, finding different sources of what is going on, whether it be anti-Semitism, racism, what is it, breaking it down, what does that really mean? And if your child has been subjected to forms of racism, it's explaining, oh my gosh, it's wrong and it's hurtful. So what do they do in these situations? And on the other end of it, it's when you see this going on. Okay, you see a friend, you see a family member, you see somebody that you work with. I think the worst thing that we can do is telling our kids to be quiet about it. And it's not about evoking violence. It's not about getting into a fight. But silence, to me, is not okay. It's not laughing at a joke that is made that it's inappropriate. It's not allowing bigotry to kind of, I'm not going to say win, but to take over silence, because that's not okay. So going back to, if your young person has been subjected to different forms of racism or bigotry, it's encouraging them on a daily basis that these things are not okay. It's allowing them to, encouraging them to be around people. It's defining what a friend is that make you feel better about yourself and that are a real friend. And if situations arise, it's speaking up against it and relaying to your child whether, again, they're being subjected to racism or they're seeing it. Because at some point, it's either or for all of us, that it's not okay. And speaking up is necessary. And violence isn't okay. But there will always be people in our society who are hateful, who are narrow-minded, who are angry, and feel threatened by other people. So what do they do in those situations? They take it out, they lash out, which is not okay. But kind of coming back and matching it with violence is not okay either. So where I'm going to come from when it comes to our next generation, it's just driving home to them, your kids at the dinner table, the kids that are maybe in your classroom, to, you're in the car. Our kids are sponges. And if they don't feel like this topic is something we're comfortable talking about, they're not going to ask. On the second end of it, them being sponges, your mindset, your mentality, they take in. So if on the outside it's, hey, I super love everybody and I would never be against A, B, C, or D group, but behind closed doors and at home, at the dinner table, watching a movie and making a comment about a specific racial group or a religion or whatever it is, our kids soak that in. And this generation of young people, the more that we just reinforce and saturate them with all people are created equal. And do we really, really mean that all people are created equal, and it's peace and it's fighting for what is right? I think there's too much silence that goes on. It's fighting for what is right, because when somebody has been subjected to racism or is being, and we have people that are trying to squelch equality, I have issues with that. There have been situations both in Europe and North America where, businesses have had, paint tossed on them from, somebody, a Jewish family that might own it, or if an African American family, like it's craziness. And the more we talk about how that's not okay, and you're in the wrong and these people are being held accountable, and the more our kids hear that, it affects their hearts. I'm a big believer that when we hear it and it's reiterated from the dinner table to out playing soccer practice to in the classroom, it begins to soak in and deeply soak in. This topic is absolutely something that can be uncomfortable with, but if we think that, this is something new, it's not. I think the more we talk about it, the more power we have, I think about one of the most powerful experiences I ever had as a young person is when I was in Poland. I spent the summer in Belarus and had the opportunity to visit Auschwitz. And as a person of Jewish descent, to stand there and think about the atrocities that happened, it was gut-wrenching. But at the same time, the reality of what a collective group of human beings are capable of when anger, ignorance is propagated and fueled, and people stay silent until it's too late. There's something wrong. And so I think we need to remind our young people and the people throughout our country, in Europe and different parts of our history. African Americans not too long ago weren't allowed to vote. There were different bathrooms. I mean, crazy things in terms of to say that this was hundreds of years ago. It wasn't. So hurt is there and anger is still there on the sides of those who've been subjected to this, but also those who are ignorant and angry. And we need to squelch it, and we need to talk to our kids, and we need to empower our kids and say it's not okay for anyone to think this way, and it's okay to speak up, and violence isn't the answer, but there's power in encouraging our kids and having them gravitate towards other people who believe that it's not just about peace, but it's about having a voice. And it's not allowing a minority group, a small group of people that really isn't that small right now, that are full of anger and hatred, to just be kind of put on the back burner because you know what, it's not okay. And I encourage you, dialogue about this, because there's been a whole lot of hurt out there. There's confusion with a lot of our kids. What's going on? Let's talk about it. And it's not okay, and it's scary, and your voice and your heart as a 6-year-old or a 16-year-old can change the world, and we need to let our kids know that. I encourage you to jump on goodnesschick.com tomorrow, where I'm blogging about this, putting out a post, going to put out some resources, and I just say keep on keeping on. Peace, love, and goodness. Have a great one.